consume these various plants, and they would consider these plants to be extensions of the god or goddess themselves. If you read Terence McKenna's book, The Food of the Gods, he talks a lot about, even to this day, if you study, peyote ceremonies and such, they consider, these plants to actually have, deities living within them. And by consuming these various, plant gods, as they were often referred to, or goddesses, as I prefer to call them, they would allow these different deities to enter into them and communicate with them. And so many different parables in history have been written about this experience, and it's somewhat confusing because whether they were using mushrooms or opiates or cannabis at times is difficult to determine because of the last couple thousand years of prohibition, where the Catholics and other Christians have gone and destroyed as much information about these various plants and their history as possible. And I think a good example is even before this, I passed by where the Egyptians, right? This is Haset, I think her name is. This goddess here, you can see, this is clearly a marijuana leaf on the top here. If you look at many of the different ceremonies that were attributed to this goddess, you will see not only incense burners, and there's several different styles of incense burners that you could learn to recognize in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. But also, and I didn't bring it this year, but the last 2 years I brought one of my pictures I have at home with a bunch of Egyptians with this little pile of what they call unguent on the top of their heads. If you look it up, they don't really explain what it is very well. And often, when you study some things that you assume are cannabis related, they have very vague explanations of what the real term might be, like the tree of life, right? Like, the Christians don't really know what the tree of life is. They'd like everybody to think it's symbolic of something and doesn't really represent, a real plant, which is completely not the case at all. And so the little pile on the top of their heads was actually mostly hashish, mixed in with a few other oils and perfumes that they would use sometimes in ceremonies to deal with the dead, but they did all sorts of weird stuff with the dead, so that's nothing to be, I can't say much about that, but the picture I have and some other pictures I've seen is where they use these at parties. And what it would be they'd even have this ring of metal that would go around the top of your head that was meant to hold the oils that were contained in this pile of unguent. Because you'd put it at the top of your head, and the idea would be that you'd party and let this pile of hashish and oil melt into your hair and saturate into the bloodstream, into your brain as quickly and directly as possible. And the metal strip there was meant to help keep as much oil in your hair as possible through that experience. The Egyptians used all sorts of funky different drugs and things like that, but as I say, the few examples amongst the Egyptian art that are left are not very well promoted. You have to really dig them out. This is quite rare in some ways. The Tree of Life, just to nail down a few more other things about why it could be considered the Tree of Life, aside from the fact that, again, in particular when eaten, it would help achieve a state of euphoria and possibly understanding of human nature and others that would be attributed to, Mother Goddess or Gaia, whatever, you term. Like, if you look back at a lot of ancient history, actually, it's not different gods and goddesses. Most ancient religions over 10,000 years ago were pretty much goddess worshiping, right? Not very many male deities before them, from my understanding, although I prove wrong all the time. It became known as the Tree of Life partly because it was really good for seed. The seed is very nutritional. It can be used as well in lamps for burning oil, so you'd be able to obviously keep things lit over the winter, but in particular these seeds would last over several winters. So if you didn't have a harvest at all, say through different ice ages in particular, it was useful because you didn't have a short or a long growing season at all when you were in the ice ages. You'd have just a really short time. So if you were living in some area near a river delta or Egypt or something like that, you'd have a few months in the summer where you might be able to pull off a crop. And nothing produces faster or better essential fatty acids and proteins than cannabis. So you could throw the seeds in some fertile ground, hopefully, get a crop off before the winter time came, and those seeds would be able to sustain you through days that you wouldn't be able to get any meat, because you can live entirely off of hemp seed that contains all essential fatty acids and proteins that you need to survive. You could live indefinitely for your whole life if you had nothing but bags of hemp seed. It would be really boring, but it could be done. Just like vegetarians, I haven't eaten meat in over 12 years. It's totally possible. In fact, it's probably healthier for us to do these sorts of things. And so the fiber as well became incredibly useful. It would have been first used as mats probably, right, where you just wove the branches together and threw them on the ground and made a mat for the bottom of your household. Or cave, or wherever you were living, progressing into weaving into clothing. Canvas this year is made out of hemp, or old canvas. So, the different uses of cannabis certainly attributed to its growth. It was used around the world in a variety of ways. One of the oldest known artifacts containing cannabis is actually from Taiwan.